we see a lot of people that, and I think because of COVID, folks were forced to be an entrepreneur. They were doing DoorDash or Lyft or whatever the case may be. And what I've seen is those are all hustles.
Yeah.
Not meaningful and gratifying to that person.
Right.
Right. It will get them by and it will help them get a job or help them get currency, right, to pay their bills, but it's not gratifying. So what we're starting to see now, a lot more folks coming in and wanting to be back in the workforce.
Welcome to Business with Purpose. I'm your host, Molly Stillman, and this show is all about bringing you the stories behind the brands, the companies, and the small businesses that are changing the world. Each week, I get to sit down with an incredible entrepreneur, business leader, community activist, speaker, author, or just an incredible person who is trying to make a positive impact, not only through their personal life, but also with their career. My goal is to show you, the listener, that no matter what you do for a living, you can make an impact. My guest this week is Rob Andrews. Rob leads an organization called CommunityWorks, which aims to create impact through economic mobility. The organization originally started as Denver Works, founded by Debbie Johnson. Because they expanded beyond Denver to Colorado Springs and Aurora and all across Colorado, they've branded themselves as CommunityWorks. They serve 5 target populations: individuals on temporary aid, needy families, veterans, formerly incarcerated individuals, and individuals 50 years and older. Through CommunityWorks, they have developed an occupational school where they have short-term, industry-recognized credentialing programs that help individuals land jobs. You know, I talk all the time on this podcast about the importance of economic opportunity and just getting people a job and how much that matters in the life of families and in the lives of communities. And that is exactly what CommunityWorks is doing. I love that Rob is really focused in such a hyper community-oriented way, and I am just so inspired by the work that they are doing. I know that you're going to love this conversation, but before I get to my chat with Rob, I want to thank our partner of the show, and that is Mama Suds. You know that I am such a big fan of Mama Suds. I have been a longtime supporter of them. They've been a partner of the podcast for years, and I love supporting a mama-owned small business. But most of all, I love that their products actually work. Their products are incredible. We use everything from their Castile soap to their all-purpose household cleaner to their laundry soap, toilet balm, stain stick, you name it, we've used it and we love it. Everything is safe, non-toxic, and actually effective. They actually work. I want you to fall in love with Mama Suds too. So head to mamasuds.com and use the promo code Molly to get 15% off your order. That's mamasuds.com and use the promo code Molly to get 15% off your order. Now, on to my conversation with Rob Andrews. Rob, welcome to the show. I am pumped to have you here. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Molly. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I want to we're going to get past all the niceties and we're just going to dive right in and have you give us the Rob 101. So yeah. I want you to tell us who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. Rob Andrews, President and CEO of CommunityWorks, originally from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Grew up in Colorado Springs, where there are 5 military bases. My family originally migrated there from Compton, California. My parents have Southern roots. They met in Compton and migrated there, which gave us another life. I was born in Colorado Springs. Ironically, the only one of my siblings born out of 5 of us in Colorado Springs, which is very interesting. Grew up, went to Sierra High School, went to Hastings College, and then I went to the Canadian Football League for a brief time. And that's where the story really gets started. I went there and I had a roommate named Brandon Browner, played for the Seahawks, really large, 6'4", 220 pounds, as fast as I'll get out. And he would play football as if his life depended on that.
Right.
And for me to get to that level and say, ooh, I don't think my heart is there where my life depends on that. I need to find something where my life does depend. And that became the community. So going to a liberal arts college at Hastings College, where I'm now a trustee, I found myself wanting to give back and wanting to grow and wanting to be in the community. And that's how I got into the work I do now. I mean, there's a longer story about going through careers and setbacks and all those things, but that's the short version of the story.
And so you started CommunityWorks for people that maybe aren't from, the Colorado area and maybe they haven't heard of it. What is it that you do?
Yeah, so I didn't start CommunityWorks. I was brought on in our 20th year. We're now in our 27th year.
That's right. I misspoke. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We help remove barriers to employment through job preparation and job placement. So a couple different ways. We do that through industry recognized credentials. We have short-term programs that get folks skills and get them a credential to get back to work. And then we do that with our supportive services. We help them remove the barriers through helping them pay rent or getting a car or helping them to pay for bus tickets and things like that. So that's how we do it here. We're looking to expand outside of Colorado. As we talk now, we are in 7 sites around Colorado, and it's been very impressive. We started when I got here, it was 5 of us in a warehouse, and then we grew it to near 50 folks.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So I want to go back to you talking about your time playing football and when you really started to, notice a shift within yourself that football, while I'm sure you enjoyed it, wasn't the thing that you went to bed thinking about and woke up thinking about. It wasn't the thing that really kind of, to borrow almost like a cliche phrase, like ignited your soul on fire. You know what I mean? That's just the thing that you knew you were born and created to do. When did that shift start to happen for you? And what did that look like?
September 30th of 2006. I broke my ankle my senior year in college, broke my fibula, my tibia, for my ligaments, and I was depressed for a few days.
Yeah.
And knowing that my career could possibly be over. What got me out of that was I was also the leader at school for Multicultural Student Union. I was also the co-chair of Team Against Bias, which prevented folks from having bias against other kids that went to school there, regardless of age, race, religion, sexual orientation. And that really fed my soul. So as I got well, I had surgery, started to think about my future plans for the following year. I sent a tape to Canada and said, hey, if somebody wants to pick up a kid that went to a small school and doesn't have really a lot of tape, please do. And I think that was just God's way of, I'm also a religion minor, so you'll hear the undertones of that a lot. I think that was God's way of showing me what I wanted. Since I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a professional football player, and I got to do that. But it wasn't my life passion, and it wasn't what I was set out to do on earth. Yeah. And getting there and seeing a Pro Bowl player, a 2-time Super Bowl champion, and what it took to get to that level, that just wasn't where my heart was at. And I think I needed to see that through divine intervention.
Yeah. I think so many of us go through those moments. And so I did not grow up in the church. I became a Christian when I was 25, and my whole life I wanted to be a comedian and I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live. Like that was the thing I was going to do. That was what I was created to do. That's what I was born to do. And I really was just convinced that that was what my life, like purpose and passion and goal was. And I did tons of, things throughout high school and college and even right after college. But my story is a little bit different, or a lot different. I didn't, play football in Canada and whatnot, but, but eventually there was this moment. And obviously like after I came to know the Lord, like I realized that was maybe more of a surface level manifestation of like what was actually really deep and passionate within me. And that's like helping people to understand and know like where joy comes from and what that actually looks like in a practical way. And so I see that so much of it in you and like what you were kind of sharing. And I think so many people relate to that, whether they, and how that ends up working in their lives is so different. Yeah. And so when did you leave the CFL and come to Denver to start doing this?
Well, so I left early in training camp after our second preseason game. Then I came back and the CFL is very different and complex than the NFL. People are probably not going to understand it, and we don't have time to explain it. But I then went back to Colorado Springs to take care of my father. So he passed away probably about 4 to 5 years after that. Yesterday was actually his 10-year anniversary of his passing, but he passed away after that. And that was more where I got to sit and kind of realize that, hey, maybe I need to be more in the community.
Yeah.
I really wanted to play football and thinking about it because I grew up poor and I wanted to buy my mom a house. I wanted to buy my dad a house. And the reason why the work is so important, what I do now, because we work with adults, and the thought as a kid is I want to give my parents this financial space where they can feel comfortable.
Right.
I just found another vehicle to do it. Right. So now I'm giving folks financial space to feel comfortable at the work that I do.
Yeah.
So would my parents have come to CommunityWorks? Absolutely. They would have been here. They would have got the help, and they would have moved on with their time. So like you with comedy, football was just a vehicle to get me to another space where I can get the skills, right, to create the other vehicle to really help people and do my life work.
Right. Well, I love that your focus really is, and I mean, I realize it's in the name, so people are gonna be like, well, duh, but it being on the community. And actually, just my husband and I, we were on a date last week. We were sitting at dinner, and we were just kind of talking about, when we got married, we live in kind of a small town outside of Durham, North Carolina, and so this kind of like little tiny town that's connected to Durham. And we were talking about how, like, when we got married in Hillsborough. We lived in Hillsborough. We loved this little town. And then we moved to Durham. And then here we are, 10 years later, we're back in Hillsborough. And, how much this little town has really impacted us in our marriage and our kids and all this stuff, and how we want to, live and die here. And, and so we started talking about, like, what does change really look like within our community on a cellular level, and how that then impacts, the communities around it. And anyway, we got into like this pretty deep conversation about this, and what does that look like on a really practical level. And he's like, what if this was just like, we didn't have other jobs, like we just focused on, changing our community, just those kinds of things. And you really start to, my husband and I have really deep conversations over it when we don't have our children. But
I know what that's like.
Yeah, I know. Right. And, but so I love when I talk to people like you who are doing that, like in your own communities, and you're working with people directly on the ground in communities, and you're really working to impact communities from the inside out. So I want to break this down for people, because so often, especially in just the nature of our polarized social media, everybody's a keyboard warrior world, everybody thinks like our lives, begin and end and live and breathe and die on like global and national politics. And that's the end all be all. And that what's happening at that level is going to like affect us at a cellular level. And I don't want to get into all the like nitty gritty of it. Like, yes, sure, those things affect us. But what really matters is when we start to break it down to what is happening next door. How do you impact and connect with your neighbor and the person who lives down the street, and the people who are experiencing homelessness on the corner that you pass every day? So I would love for you to really break that down. What does that look like? Because I know that that's a huge passion of yours.
Yes. I mean, you're talking about interdependence, and that's really what I'm passionate about, is the interdependence of how everything actually feeds into together. So when we get to that national and that geopolitical level, there's an understanding about how we should work together. Mm-hmm. So for us here at the organization, we're in the community at every step of the way. So we build into our job descriptions that folks should be on boards. You have to go out and do these community events. We have to make sure that we're constantly working with our neighbors to make sure, as your job, in your job description, we're working with our neighbors to ensure that we're going to have that interdependence, and folks know that that's how change really happens. So I went to this is a while ago, it sparked my memory. I went to a leadership event probably 10 years ago, and the woman was a captain from the Air Force. She was leading it. And she said, she made us break down what vision is. Vision, here's your mission, right? But vision is the first step. So when you leave here tomorrow, what's the first thing you're going to do to impact your community? It could be, I'm going to vote for a city council person, or it could be, I'm going to pick up my neighbor's newspaper and put it on their doorstep. Both of those things are just as important. And you have to understand that when you're doing a community act, they're all just as important, because you don't know what's going to come from that, right? We don't know how that works. Chemically, we know that if we do something nice for each other, then it makes somebody else do nice for each other, right? The synapses in our brain works that way. I'm nice to you, you're nice to somebody else. But from a community standpoint, the way that works is, what is the one thing I can do in this moment to impact somebody else? And if you can think like that, you'll start to think like that. You'll start to grow like that. And then you'll see that change at a small level grow in size and really start to affect people around you.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that, because I know that one of your big focuses is on employment and kind of connecting people to jobs. And man, I have over 6.5 years doing this podcast. The amount of times I've talked about the importance of like economic stability, reliable employment. I mean, just all of those things. I feel like for the people who have been listening from the beginning are probably like, Molly, we get it. Cause that's like, I talk about it over and over and over again, whether you live in Denver, whether you live in small town Hillsborough, or whether you live in Delhi, India, or Nairobi, Kenya, or it doesn't matter. Like, people were born to work and to create an income and to support their families and all these kinds of things. And, and in fact, like I say this all the time, like honorable work is God honoring. And I mean, you can go all the way back, whether or not y'all want to believe it or not, but like go all the way back to creation in the book of Genesis. And what does God do when he creates Adam? He puts him in the garden to work it. That's before the fall. That's before the apple and the snake and all that stuff. Like, he puts them in the garden to work, because that is what we were created to do. And when we don't have work that is dignified, we don't have work that is paying us a fair living wage, when we don't have that, we feel at a cellular level that we are not living up to the what we were created to do. And, whether, again, and we could go into all the nuances of that, because people are like, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom, or I'm a stay-at-home dad. You are working.
Yeah.
Children.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Working. Yeah.
there's so many nuances to that.
That's meaningful work.
Absolutely. 100%, 100%. So it's going to look different for every person. So my point in setting up all of this is this is a huge focus for you. And what has this looked like, especially over the last few years, where, you've been with the company, we've been with CommunityWorks for what, 10 years now, you said?
6. I'm in my 6th year. Yeah.
6th year. So, you've seen the economic ups and downs. I mean, you've seen the economy really change in so many different ways. I mean, now we live in this economy where I feel like everybody's hiring and everybody's short-staffed, and there's just all these different factors. What has all of this looked like for you on a practical level with the communities that you work with the companies you work with, all those kinds of things?
From a practical standpoint, we know folks get gratification from working. That's evident because there's a job loss grief cycle. Scientifically, if folks lose their job, it mimics them losing somebody in their life.
Yeah.
That's very important. So they go through that grief cycle, those 6 stages, and then they're ready to go back to work. So we work with that. That's a practical level, preparing somebody to go back to work.
Right.
In the community with our business partners, what we do is we take their competencies and we recruit to who they need to work with. So we'll sit down with our business partners once a year, at least once a year. And we'll say, hey, what's changed? How can we help recruit and get people to recruit and screen for you to get them in our program and get them to you? So that's changed and evolved over the years. We've seen people go from, I want somebody that can do work A through Z, to somebody that says, we need the entrepreneurial spirit in the organization now. We see a lot of people that, and I think because of COVID, folks were forced to be an entrepreneur. They were doing DoorDash or Lyft or whatever the case may be. And what I've seen is those are all hustles.
Yeah.
Not meaningful and gratifying to that person.
Right.
Right. It will get them by and it will help them get a job or help them get currency, right, to pay their bills, but it's not gratifying. So what we're starting to see now, a lot more folks coming in and wanting to be back in the workforce.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I've had quite a few conversations with, I've done some traveling recently, and I'm the kind of person who, which I realize for most people, this will come as a shock to no one. But when I get into like a Lyft or an Uber, by the time I get out, I know my Uber or Lyft driver's entire life story. I'm like, good luck with your custody battle or whatever it is. Get out of the Uber. But so many of the Uber or Lyft drivers I've talked to are I mean, obviously that's not their full-time job. And so I'm always interested, like, well, what do you do? What do you do for a living? What are you really passionate about? And you're right. So many of them is like, well, I was laid off. And so I just was able to start doing this because it was able to pay the bills. But I really am hoping that I could actually use my Uber driver money to be able to fund, starting my own business or starting my own company, like these kinds of things. And the stories, I mean, it's thousands of them, thousands of these stories of people. And I'm sure that you see these as well. And you work with really specific target populations who have added layers of challenges to employment. I would love to know, especially if there's somebody listening who maybe, has misconceptions about certain populations, or maybe they are an employer, maybe they've been hesitant to work with some of the populations that you work with. What are some of the things that you've seen and experienced that maybe would help dispel those myths?
Sure. Yeah, let's go through them. We serve five populations: folks that are formerly incarcerated, folks that are on food assistance, formerly known as food stamps, folks that are on temporary aid to needy families, which they're receiving food assistance and a little supplement income from the government, veterans, and then people that are 50 plus. So if we're looking at folks that are formerly incarcerated, the major hesitation from employers is to think they're going to reoffend somehow on their premises.
Right.
What we have seen is folks don't want to reoffend; they want an opportunity.
Right.
And so there are metrics in place and things in place to help prevent that. There's the work opportunity tax credit that folks can get, business owners can get, that if somebody does make a mistake, that you're backed by the government to support what you're doing. There's federal bonding that does the same thing. So the way we've been able to market and target to that specific demographic is allow us to be their right hand.
Yeah.
So we're going to send them to you. We're going to follow them for a year to make sure they have everything in place, transportation, clothes, whatever it may be, so that they don't have that even thought of having to do that again.
Right.
They can be completely rehabilitated, and then we can move forward from there.
Right.
Talking about folks that are on food assistance. Well, we live in a world right now, especially in America, where we have a lot of the working poor.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're working poor, you need to help supplement your income. A way to do that is applying for food assistance. It's a vastly underused resource in America because there's so much stigma that comes along with it.
Right.
Right. So, and with that stigma, we've seen people take on two jobs and still have little kids. These kids become latchkey kids. They can't be around instead of just taking the aid that they need. Now, these people are already working for you. Quick story. When I was working in Colorado Springs, we had a lady came in who was a former Colorado college professor, became a city council person in Manitou Springs, and then became the mayor. But she was in the program.
Wow.
She was in the assistance program. She was on food assistance, and we helped her to reach those heights by just being by her side and adjusting. But she's a former professor from an esteemed liberal arts college and couldn't get a job to support her and her daughter.
Right.
Folks that are 50 plus, people are worried about technology and whether or not they can stay around. And we haven't seen that. We've seen them just adapt it just quickly as anybody else learning technology. We've just got to put them in places where they can do it. So what we did, we created a call center. We have a transitional jobs program. We bring them in, we teach them how to work in a call center, and then we put them to work outside of that, outside of what we do in a call center. So we see a lot of stigmas. We see a lot of myths. It's our job. I truly believe that why we're here is to remove the barriers. That means we have to overturn the self-esteem of folks that have been beaten down by society, telling them they can't do it, and then overturn the folks that are saying they can't do it by proving that they can.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I want to say it was like last February, I had Thomas Vazo, who is the executive director of Homeboy Industries. Are you familiar with Homeboy Industries? Love Homeboy and the work they do. But he and I talked a lot about that too, because, again, it's when they're working with, former gang members, like there's a lot of challenges associated with that. And, but one of the things I think is really fascinating, and I'd be interested if you see this as well, is the men and women who come through your program, especially who are coming from, especially the former incarcerated individuals. They are, I would assume that the recidivism rates are lower when they're coming through programs like yours.
Absolutely. So Colorado's recidivism rate is hovering around 50%. And our organization is 2.4. Wow. So folks who come through our program have been known to be successful coming out. And that's why we have so many strong relationships in Colorado with the attorney general and with the chair of the Department of Corrections and with the governor, and they see us and they come through and they ask for advice because we're able to get people to work and keep them in work and prevent them from going back to prison.
Wow. That is amazing. I mean, I knew it had to be better, but that is like staggering. That is staggering. And really encouraging to show that, again, it's like, give people a chance, and the importance of seeing people, no matter what circumstances that they come through, is to look them in the eye and see them as another human being who is no different than you or I, and to see them as another. I mean, especially, this is something I tell my kids all the time. Is it doesn't matter, like when we come across other people, we see those people like as image bearers of God. Like they are created in God's image, and they are people that are to be valued, to be loved, to be respected, and and that is so key. But I really love the way that CommunityWorks does this.
Yeah, thank you. We believe in the folks that walk through our door, and we have a lot of faith in them, right? Faith is the belief in things that are unseen.
Right.
So we may not be able to see them do the work exactly, but we know about their character, about their home life. We know what they need. And that gives us more reason to trust and believe before we send them out to an employer.
Absolutely. So what has been the biggest change in you over this time? When you first started to kind of where you are now, what have you seen in yourself?
That's an interesting question. I think starting out, you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to go and want to change the world. And I'm still that way. I think what has helped me, or what's changed in me, is being more adamant about the change that I want to see, and having less patience for not changing things. We've gotten to a level where we could be really okay with just being this organization who is at this size and we serve X amount of people. But I've really been intentional about saying that's not okay, because we believe in our model and we believe in the people we serve. So we should do more, right? We should be doing more. Right. That's our challenge. And I've become less patient with that over the years. Now, have I been harder to deal with? I'm sure. But that comes from anxiety of wanting to be the best in every community we're in.
Man, that's good. That's so good. Okay. So I know you guys are in 7 communities all around Colorado, and you kind of alluded to, this is something that you are in discussions with to expand outside of that. What is on the horizon for CommunityWorks? What are you hoping and praying for the future for this organization?
Well, there's a lot of challenges still face folks that are in our target populations. Transportation is a major problem. We've got to solve that challenge. There's challenges with folks just getting back to work. How do we help folks that are 1099 employees or contractors grow themselves that are in these target populations? How do we support the single mom? What's going to happen with daycare? So there's a lot of challenges still to be faced and to be worked on. And we're going to take them one at a time and remove those barriers to employment. That's what excites me is, okay, we have this challenge. It's our job to meet that challenge for the community. So how do we do it? How do we bring all the stakeholders together to work on this problem and then solve it? I'm a part of the Joshua generation, and I just feel like we just kicked the can on a lot of these problems for a very long time. We've expected people to go to work in a society that they didn't create, on a bus route they didn't create, and still have the same expectations of somebody that has a car. We have to really look at how we're doing that for people. And if we're saying that that's the expectation and it's their problem, well, that's a little misguided, I think. So how can we reimagine these things so we can be more supportive as a community to make our community grow and foster? Because that mother who has to take 2 or 3 bus trips now has to do customer service work, worried about her child that's a latchkey kid at home. And that's just not acceptable if we're going to say we're doing God's work.
Man. Okay. So I'm curious. So you said you were a senior in high school or a senior in college, your fall of 2006. So you graduated in 2007?
Yep.
So same, also graduated college in 2007. I will be real honest. I've never heard the term Joshua generation. What is that?
Yeah. The Joshua generation is our generation that acts, does the work, acts on the work, really ambitious and resilient, and does the work of Joshua.
Man, that's good. Why have I never heard that before? I love that. And I would completely agree.
You're millennial. You hear millennial a lot, but you don't hear the Joshua generation.
Yeah. So, and it's funny because I get it. I look at the charts or whatever that try to say I'm a millennial. I don't identify with millennials because I grew up, okay, this is how I like to say, I'm like, this is not a true millennial because I grew up, my parents had an 800 number to our house so that I could call them from a payphone for free.
Oh, wow.
Because they were like, well, if you're out and you need to get in touch with us, you need to be able to find a payphone, if you don't have a quarter. Mm-hmm. Don't tell me other millennials were doing that. I'm like,
no, but it's brilliant.
No. And my current cell phone number was my pager number. Okay. I had a pager.
Yeah. I remember those.
See, I'm like, I don't feel like that's a millennial thing, but maybe, I don't know.
Technology just sped things up, but you're probably a millennial. I'm a millennial. I've come to terms with that. Yeah. I'm good with that.
I have heard the term zennial, the XE, whereas like you're that weird bit between Gen X and millennial. Cause we grew up without, we grew up with TVs with rabbit ears and you put the tinfoil on it to make sure to be able to get the game clear. And we grew up with the 800 numbers and the pagers, and we didn't have social media, and iPhone didn't get invented till after we got out of college, like all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we saw the all that kind of stuff. And we are an entrepreneurial generation. And I find it really interesting. And I would actually love to go back over the last 330, episodes and figure out how many of the people I interviewed are within our age within like 1 to 2 years. Cause I would think it's actually a pretty large percent. And it's not like I'm seeking out, like, you can only be on my show if you're 37 to 39. I really think it would be really interesting to know, because I had another interview just this morning. Guy was the exact same age. So I just find that very fascinating. And just for you to put the term Joshua generation just really was a very illuminating for me. So Rob, I really like that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. When I got out of college, it was a sermon in church, and it talked about our generation being the Joshua generation, not accepting the what, but needing the why, and then acting on what's going on.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that and think that is really fascinating. Man, really love that. Okay, Rob, well, before we get to the get to know you round, is there anything that you want to really leave the listeners with? Like what, how can people, act in their own communities? What are some practical things people can do to make, a direct impact on their neighbors and in their communities?
It starts at different levels. For some folks, it's going to be just volunteering their time. That works for everybody that wants to start at a small level to impact change. Some folks, it can be monetary. They don't have the time to volunteer. Invest in your community. If you don't invest in it, you're not going to control who does invest in it.
Yeah.
Right. And the community's going to change, and you may not like it.
Right.
And at a larger level, go work in your community. Get a job, working 9 to 5 in your community, or be on a board of directors. That helps you control and see how things are independent in your community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, Rob, this has been so good. I'm really grateful for you. And for the listeners, I will obviously have all of Rob's information along with CommunityWorks in the show notes. So, and especially if you're in Colorado, to check them out, find out how you can get involved and support the work they're doing. All right, Rob, this is the portion of the show where we ask some fun get to know you questions. So are you ready for the get to know you round?
Yeah.
All right. Question number 1 is, what is something that has happened to you in the last year that is particularly memorable or particularly impactful?
Getting engaged.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's awesome. When's the big day?
Don't know. It will be in Mexico. Don't know when.
Love it.
I'll go check that out here soon. But that was probably the most impactful thing that happened. I was in a relationship years ago. I was married years ago. However, just didn't work out. And so to have a new partner that's as supportive of me and my career and my children and my life has been great. So
that's awesome. Well, congratulations. Congratulations. All right. So I know your passion for community. I know that you once played football. I know that you were a religion minor. These are some things I know about you. What is something that I would not guess about you?
Ooh, I'm a writer.
Really? Okay. What kind of writing do you like to do?
All types of writing, poetry, blog, short form, not really long form. I've written raps. It just, I love the art and science of putting words together and rhetorical devices and sentences and things like that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm also a writer, so love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you had to eat the same meal for dinner every night for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Nachos.
Nachos. Okay, what kind?
Carne asada nachos. So steak, tortilla chips, steak, guacamole, cheese, pico de gallo, which is a salsa, sour cream.
Now I'm hungry. That was good. I also love nachos. Have you seen this new trend? I've not tried it, but a couple of my friends have done it with their families where for dinner at night, what they'll do is they'll put out like a big, I guess like tinfoil. I don't know, something. They'll put it on the table and then they do like a big nacho bar, like right there where everybody can kind of just eat, make your own style of nachos. I think I'm on board with that.
Yeah. Kind of like Chipotle, but
yeah,
nachos.
I like it. Okay. All right, cool. All right. And then my last question is the question I ask all my guests. And that is, what does it mean to you, Rob, to run a business or an organization with purpose?
Sure. Oh, it's the greatest feeling in the world to wake up and be filled with purpose every day. You get up every day to impact somebody else's life and to help other people impact other people's lives and to see it on their face. So it's a undescribable feeling, but you're doing the right thing. It's very hard to describe, but it is the most fulfilling feeling that I've had in my life.
So good. Rob, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for the work that you're doing and how you're changing your community and making an impact on so many people's lives.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If there is something that you liked or something that you learned, would you share this episode or this show with somebody on social media? You can find me. I'm at Still Being Molly or at Business with Purpose Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. So you can tag us. And that is totally free and easy for you to do. And it really helps the show to grow and it helps support the show. Also, would you take a moment? Would you go to your favorite podcast listening app and would you click that subscribe or follow or whatever button it is there to make sure that you never miss a new episode of the show? And would you take a moment to leave a review? Leaving a review really does help me to know what you're liking and how the show is impacting you. This show is produced by the incredible team at Third Wheel Media. Now, I want you to go and do something good with purpose on purpose.